Hi everyone, my name's Dan and I'm going to walk you through how to make this camp kitchen or tailgate storage unit. Some quick facts. It weighs about 19 pounds and that was the criteria for us. We wanted a lightweight system, which is why you're going to see it's made out of foam and fiberglass screen. It cost around $500 Canadian to construct. Our design is to fit in the Yakima Gear Warrior basket. It's fully waterproof, and it took around 60 hours to construct. And this is the inside that you can see here. Got lots of different. All right, here's an overview of all the supplies that you will need. So what I used is two 4 foot by 8 foot 1 inch boards. I used one 8 foot by 2 foot 1/2 inch board. This is the hot knife that I recommended earlier. You've got your fiberglass screen. This is going to be weather stripping that I'm going to put on the door to resist rain and moisture. For the bonding primer, we're using Bear. And then I got obviously brushes, throwaway brushes that I can use. I'm going to use black clock on the inside. And the glue that Nomad recommended is this Gorilla Glue, so that's what I'm going to use. The catches on the door, these are the kind of catches that you use on a Jeep hood. So I think they're going to be quite flexible and good, so hopefully those will work. The underside, I'm going to mount using these 1/2 inch U-clips. So I'm going to mount the reinforced foam directly to the Yakima basket with that. And then I've got some hinges as well. Also, what I'm going to build later into the design, and I'll show it, is wood, because wherever I'm going to be putting any of the clips or hinges, I'm going to actually laminate wood into it so that we can put screws into it. There's been some failures of using sort of drywall screws into the foam, so I'm going to laminate wood into the areas where I need to. As far as tools, as I mentioned, we've got the hot knife, and I've got a drywall square in different squares. Pretty minimal on the tools. It's been very easy so far. You can see here that I actually had to extend the graph paper, and I'm glad I did that, because basically every square now represents 1 inch. And because I had it drawn to scale, as I start to go through the other parts of the design, and I'll flip over now, this was the bottom, so probably the most complex piece with all the blocks. But then as I go to the roof, I kept it in scale, and that allowed me to make sure that all the finger joints, the notches, and the outlet parts of the finger joints were lining up. So I had to make a few adjustments to this as I was making the plan, but it was very useful to do it to scale. These are going to be the side walls. These are the 1 inch walls here. This is the 1/2 inch wall here. And this is going to be the back piece here. So again, it was very useful to do it to scale. I'm not going to put links to all the products. I'm not quite that savvy, but I did want to highlight this hot knife that I'm using. It's fantastic. It allows you to set the temperature properly, and it's literally like cutting through something like hot butter. I did originally try to cut it with a utility knife, but for the 1 inch, it was too thick for the utility knife. And even to do one cut, I think it took me in the range of 15 minutes. With the hot knife, I was able to cut this entire base in around the same time. So the hot knife probably cuts your cutting time by around 90%. And it's incredibly easy to use because you can come by afterwards and make any corrections really, really quickly. So highly recommend the hot knife, and this one worked out really, really well for me. Okay, so here we have our Yakima gear locker, and what is going to be invisible when it's all put together are the 3 base supports. So these are going to sit like this, almost like beams under a house. And as you can see, the height is actually going to be higher than these bars. These bars won't be carrying the weight. It's the bottom of these that are going to be carrying the weight when they're reinforced. So here we have the base of the camp kitchen. As you can see, there's 3 longitudinal pieces, which are basically struts. Those are carrying the weight on the bottom. And you can see that I've already cut out slots for the 3 walls. The interior walls are going to be 1/2 inch, and the exterior walls are going to be 1 inch. And I've got the slots, the finger notches, for the back wall as well. These, where you can see the finger notches are extending here, this is no problem. I'm going to cut these away with a hot knife so they're nice and flush when I'm finished. but for now it's fine to have them out like that. So a quick note on the height of the base. This might be intuitive to some, but what I've done is I deliberately made it higher than the sidebars here. The reason for that is that I want all the weight to be carried on these bottom bars and with the bottom sort of cross pieces here. So, and the advantage too to having it a little bit higher is when I construct the door at the end, if I want to have the door overhang a little bit on the bottom so that we've got extra protection against moisture and rain coming in, then that's an option. Okay, so a quick clip on the best way to cut the walls here. So this is going to be wall 1 and 4 in the plans. And the dimensions of this are going to be a bit tricky because it's 22 by 23. So what I've done is I've made sure to mark where the bottom's going to go, where the back's going to go, and where the main dimensions are, because it's essentially a square and I didn't want to mess that up. In a sec, I'm going to show how I transpose the finger joints onto it. But basically, when you cut the walls, start with the overall dimension, so basically a full square, and then mark away your finger joints and cut those away afterwards. Okay, so here we have the cut piece, and as you can see, I've measured and marked off the areas that are going to be removed to the finger joints. The next step that I'm going to do, because I do have a lot already assembled, is I can now take this piece over and just do a quick check to see if it's going to make sense. You can see that these finger joints are going to work. And then on this side, again, these finger joints are going to mesh where I need them to. Quick shout out to Nomad, who makes a lot of videos on van renovations. It was actually his idea to do the finger joints, because a lot of people have other videos where when they adhere the materials, they simply go face to face like this. But when you do this, you can use screws, but then you're only getting one line of glue in between. When you do the finger joints, you're actually getting 3 surfaces. The other massive advantage that you can see to doing the finger joints is it allows you to do a mock-up without any glue as you build it. So by the time I'm done, I'm almost going to have all the Lego pieces together, and I'll be able to see what it looks like before I even add any glue or screen, which is fantastic. So again, shout out to Nomad. Look at those videos if you want to understand more about the glue and all the mechanics of it. He's done a great job there. Okay, so a bit of a final video on how the fit goes here. So as you can see now, I've cut out all the finger joints, and what I will show now is the way it will fit, and all the pieces are going to fit this way. So because of the planning and the measurements, I'm able, it's a bit hard to do with one hand, but there you go, sorry. There you go. So now you can see that all the finger joints fit in the way they do. And in this case, we've got it on 2 dimensions, which is great. Actually, I guess 3 sides. So there we go. And then they fit in. And again, this is the advantage of the finger joints in the mock-up, because as I continue, I will have the whole assembly built without any glue. So it allows me to suss out everything and figure out if all the dimensions are going to work. Just going to add a quick point here on duplicating parts. In the design, I was pretty deliberate to try and make all the walls as best I could and all the foundational pieces be exactly the same. The reason for this is that once you have one, then you have a quick template for the next one. So all I'm going to do here is, you can see I've got one of the 1-inch walls laying over another piece. I'm simply going to trace around it, and then I can use the hot knife to cut in all the same finger joints that I did for the last one, because they're all going to be identical. So when you can do this in designs, it's going to make your life a lot easier, especially when you're working with foam or anything you need to cut. All right, quick view now that we've got sort of 3 of the external walls in place, at least mocked up. As you can see, still no glue. So this is just the finger joints holding it structurally together here. So it really is just a mock-up. But so far, so good. There's some areas that I haven't done yet, and this is where Nomad sort of talked about the fact that you can kind of do it on the fly. You'll see that I got the slots here. This is going to be for the 1/2-inch wall. I'm still going to do finger joints here and here, but I'm not going to cut them out yet. I'm going to sort of dry fit the walls and make sure that those slots are going to be in the right point once I've made those walls. Bit of a middle step here, and this is where the mock-up comes in super handy. So what I had to do for this 1/2-inch wall, because I didn't originally cut the slots, is I've marked up where the the finger joints are going to go, and then I've laid it against the back so that I know that where I've got the outlet, if you like, of the finger joint is going to go into the hole. And so the way I did that is I just took apart the 3 walls that I had, and I laid down the back. This is the back piece. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to keep it disassembled, and then I'm going to use the hot knife to cut the holes, and then hopefully it will all line up. Okay, so we're getting near to the roof install now. Nomad does this a lot, which I appreciate, and I think a lot of people appreciate. It's when he makes mistakes, he talks to people about it so they can learn from it. And I almost did, and this is where the mock-up is extremely useful. So as you can see, I've got all the parts ready for sort of cut out, and it's all lining up pretty well. And these shelves here are going to look good. These are going to be my notches, which that shelf is going to come into. But here is where I mismeasured. So this was supposed to be 11 inches here. I actually accidentally measured 10. But because I marked where the shelf was going to go, then I could see that I was way off. So not a big deal, because I'm just going to remark this. But if I had to cut it, then I would have had extra holes. So kudos to Nomad, and kudos to the ability to mock it up and dry fit it, because you can catch these errors. Okay, so the mock-up's fairly complete now. This actually came together really well with the roof. I was able to get it on the first try. And so the next step I'm going to do is cut out an 8-inch hole for the baby propane that we're going to store on the outside. And then I'll eventually get ready for gluing once I've done the door. The point that I'm going to talk about now is something that's probably going to be pretty obvious and fair question is, why did I even keep the basket if this is going to be so strong? The answer simply is we wanted to keep the basket for the EXO system so that we could use it later. So I'm designing this so that the whole camp kitchen with the undoing of a few screws can be lifted out, and then we have the basket available to us. It's you could definitely make this cheaper if you chose not to use a basket. You could simply have a structural member underneath, which you could put right onto your rack or whatever the case may be. But for our application, we wanted to keep the basket, which is why I customized it this way. Okay, so a bit of a testament on how easy this is to work with. So I was able to lift up the entire assembly. I feel like it maybe weighs 4 pounds. And then as you can just got a little bit of cardboard holding it up. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to use the hot knife with it in situ and put the new floor in. So you wouldn't be able to do this with plywood, of course, because you'd have to get your jigsaw in there. But with the foam, it is so easy to work with that you can do a lot of modifications on the fly, which is fantastic. Okay, gluing time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the Gorilla Glue and my caulk gun, and I'm going to glue all the sides, really, of everything that you see here. I have yet to do the door, and I have yet to laminate the wood where the hinges are going to go, but I feel like I can do that after I've glued the structure together, and it's a good firm base. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so I'm into the gluing now, and I just wanted to show something in case people misinterpreted the reason for the screws. So what I've done is I've loosely, hand tightened drywall screws into the foam. The only reason those are there is to give the glue time to cure properly. So these screws are simply there almost as clamps, and they're not there for any structural support because they would rip right through the foam if that was the case. All right, very much a lesson learned here. So the Gorilla Glue in the caulk tube is not PL400. And working with foam is clearly very different than working with plywood. What I mean is normally I'll lay wood glue down with plywood with a couple of screws in there, no issues. So I put a zigzag bead of the Gorilla Glue along one surface of each of the intersection pieces of foam, thinking that would hold. It takes 24 hours cure time. That was a really long time for sure. But when I came back after 24 hours, about 3 or 4 of the joints had let go. Again, never really seen that before when I'm working with plywood. So what I've learned with the Gorilla Glue is you really have to stuff it in there. Every surface, put it in there until you see it coming out on the other side. and then as best you can, try and wait for that 24-hour cure time. It sets in about 20 minutes, so it's workable, but it almost acts more like caulk than a glue. So definitely a lesson learned for me moving forward, and for anybody else using foam, use a ton of the Gorilla Glue caulking. It doesn't matter if it's going to be messy at the end either, because in the next step we're going to be putting the bonding primer on and the screen. So and one other note too, and this is good news, is I found that it was very easy to sand the foam afterwards, which has allowed me to sort of create some rounded corners, which are going to make the box look a little bit more custom and integrated. So I found, yeah, it was very easy to sand with just a mouse sander once I'd brought it down. All right, now I'll walk through the adding of the wood. So what you're seeing here is the door. So these are going to be, this is the top of the door where the hinges are going to go. And it's going to be an optional catch to hold the door back on the top. And these are going to be the side catches that are going to hold the door closed. Now, as you can see, and there's a lot of other videos for this, whenever you use screws, you want to make sure that you actually insert wood. So as you can see, I've just cut it out with a hot knife, and I've got an excessive amount of glue here. I'm going to show you the glue, because I'm almost at the point of not really trusting the glue, because it really keeps breaking free. But this is the amount of glue I'm using on an insert that's actually going onto the unit itself. And I'm going to make sure that I let this cure for 24 hours. I'm just using tuck tape to hold it, and that's it. All right, so I'm about to kick off the lamination process, or just the edges specifically. What I did here, because I've got a full sheet of fiberglass screen, is I'm just using an old scrap piece of drywall. I marked 4 inches all the way down, because on the edges, all the experts say that you should have around 2 inches overlapping on each edge. So I'm going to be cutting 4-inch sheets over and over and over again. So I'm just using this as a template, and I'll film it again when I've got some edges complete. All right, I'm on to the skinning phase now, as it's called, or basically laminating the screen onto the unit. Ton of lessons learned here, and it was almost disheartening because I thought this would be a pretty easy step, but there's some tricks to it, I guess. So right off the bat, what I created here, simply just a scrap piece of drywall. It's a template where I just marked 2-inch spots. And this proved to be really, really easy, because when you do the edges first, here I'll show in here, you want to have 2-inch pieces. So you want to have a 1-inch overlap on each edge. So you're cutting tons of 2-inch lines. So if you just have a template like this, it makes it easier. And plus I have 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot down there. Also, as you can tell, when you get going with the primer, everything gets so messy that if you're using a tape measure all the time, you're probably going to get it paint on it. So next things I learned. So first of all, I tried to do a 4-inch piece. So 2 inches on either side for an edge piece. It didn't work. It kept coming away. So I re-researched on Google, and it said 1 inch. So that worked pretty well. The other thing, and this is pretty obvious, but I had to learn it, let gravity be your friend. So I'm actually going to sort of do the skinning on the 6 planes of this, because if you're working with the weight moving downwards, it's a lot easier. As an example, if you tried to do this sidewall here, it's going to be a lot more challenging. So as you can see, I'm going to skin all the backside first, because that's the way I've got it laid down. And the final lesson learned, that again, probably not intuitive, is the screen itself. So it comes in a roll, and what that means, what that leads to, I guess, is that the screen has a memory, kind of like fishing line. So you can see here that where I've unrolled it, it wants to roll this way. And that's actually really frustrating, because it will lift the screen off when you're trying to apply the primer and hold it down. So what I've started to do is I've inverted the rolls of screen, and I'm laying them out so that hopefully the memory of the screen will kind of go away and it won't keep peeling back, because that became quite frustrating too. All right, so I'm still going through the skinning process, and I wanted to just point out the fact that by laying out the fly screen flat, that really did solve the problem of curvature in the fly screen and it pulling away. So it really gets rid of the memory of the fly screen. So I recommend, if you want to do that in advance, try and lay it flat, or lay it the opposite way that it was rolling, because that will get rid of the memory. Another quick tip here, pretty maybe obvious to a lot, is that if you're going to do a measurement over and over again, and then in the case of this camp kitchen, it's 21 inches. I just marked it on my template, so that way I don't need to keep using a tape measure, and I can just go back to that and regularly cut 21 inches. The reason why I need 21 inches is because the depth of all the corners is around 21 inches to allow me overlap, so I'm going to have to cut it over and over and over again. That's why I just threw it on the template. A couple of things to mention here. So I already talked about the challenges of the glue sticking. So rule of thumb for me is if I were to do this over again, I'd probably use triple the amount of glue, basically, so that every surface that I squeeze it down, that I see the glue come out, almost like it was caulk. With a unit this size though, and this awkward, you're going to need about 20 clamps if you want to clamp it down while the glue is setting. And it's probably not feasible for a lot of people. So what actually worked really well, if you're careful around it, was tuck tape. So tuck tape is extremely strong. And I found that even when I used it, I was able to, if I'm careful, I was able to peel it off without the joint separating. So tuck tape actually works really well as sort of a temporary clamp while the glue was setting in this application. One other thing I'll show here is this is the unit sideways right now, but what you're seeing is the hole for the 5-pound propane cylinder. When I originally cut it, even though I had the hot knife, I cut it too large. And so I wanted to shrink it a little bit, and what I did was I took a slice of foam that I cut with the hot knife, about 1/2 inch thick, and I ran it under hot tap water for about 20 or 30 seconds, because I was suspecting that if I did that, it would become flexible and wouldn't break, and that's actually what happened. So if you need to bend a piece of foam, if you run it under sort of hot water, you'll find that it becomes extremely malleable and easy to work with, and so that would allow you to make bends in any of your sort of foam projects. I've got a ton of glue on it now, and I'm going to let it sit with tuck tape for 24 hours, and then I'll cut. Then I'll sort of finish it off with a hot knife if I need to. So now we're looking at the underside of the camp kitchen, and as you can see, I've inlaid pieces of wood into the base. The reason for this is that I'm going to be screwing in U-clamps or U-fittings that are going to go around the basket. So again, you can't screw into the foam, it won't hold, so that's why I'm inlaying the wood here, and this is updated in the plan as well. What I'm also going to do on the base, and you can see it here, is I'm also, once it's all glued together, I'm going to screen over the entire thing to give it good strength. Alright, so I'll show a bit of an experiment here. So when you try and curve the screen around edges, especially round edges, it had a tendency to pull away. So what I did last night was I tried to let the paint pull it down. It didn't work. And now I've got that face upside down. And as you can see, I've temporarily screwed drywall screws just loosely into the screen to hold it in place. Now this will be a bit messy, but after that, then I'm going to paint it and then wait for the paint to hold. And once the paint is set, then I'll be able to take the drywall screws out. What you're seeing is the underside here, so even though it's going to look a little bit ugly, when it's all done, it'll be pretty much invisible. And I'm also going to do this on the main door because I want to wrap screen around all the edges. So temporary drywall screws to hold it while the primer is setting seems to be the best option. Right, so here's the back side of the door, and this is very much an experiment, so I'll follow up on how it goes. So I wanted to carry the screen all the way around the edges. There's two reasons for that. The main reason is I want to make sure that I can laminate in fully all the wood that's going to be going around the edge of the door. The second reason, and I'm not sure if it's going to be necessary, is to have screen on the edges as well to see whether or not that's going to give it a bit more strength. This door is going to be completely exposed to the elements either when it's open or closed. So my intent right now is I'm going to put primer just on the edges here, and then when that sets, I'm going to remove all the screws and cut away the inner part because I'm not going to prime all the way. And then I'll put a final square of screen to cover off everything, to overlap sort of by an inch with everything that's left. So we'll see how it goes. Right, so I'm in the middle of the door backside skinning. I'd say it's got moderate success. It's super tricky. A couple of reasons. I wanted to round the top corners of the door, so I did. But trying to get the screen around those and get it to mesh is going to be super tough. The other thing is, even though I put the drywall screws in and tighten the screen around it, almost like you would a picture frame, as I continue to work and paint around it, it still starts to get a bit looser. So what I'm having to do is readjust and tighten the screen every time I'll come by and I'll paint, and then I'll readjust and tighten the screen as I go. So far it's only been about 5 minutes of work, so we'll see how it goes. But right now I'd say moderate success, but it is a bit tricky. Update again on the back of the door and stretching the screen around it, because it is still a bit of a process, but it's starting to work. It's very similar to stretching a canvas on a frame, where you need sort of rollers and sort of need to keep moving it. What I'm realizing is that as I move around, I need to keep stretching the screen as I kind of go. So normally I'll stretch the screen about 12 inches in front of me, and I'll show you why. Even though I put screws all the way around and tightened it when I started, you can see that as I'm moving around, there's still a lot of play left. So what's going to happen is I'm going to continue to move this down, and I'm going to cut away that extra bit in the corner. But hopefully once I've moved all the way around the frame, this will work. And the most important thing is the paint is starting to adhere to the edges, which is the trickiest part. All right, so the finish of the back of the door. So it seemed to work fairly well. On the corners, not super happy with it. It's not going to be super perfect, but certainly it carried around the edges well. So by wrapping it and tightening it with all the drywall screws, that seemed to work well. And the final step I'm going to do is just skin on a final bit of screen around the center, and then the door essentially will be done. All right, given that I hand cut the rounded corners for the door, and I'm sanding them for the camp kitchen, what I did was I just transposed the curvature so that I can get an idea of how to match it. So as you can see right now, I need to take off a little bit more. Quick note on screen, as I'm running near the end here, you're going to need approximately 50 feet by 3 feet of screen. That sounds like an absurd amount, but I originally bought 8 feet, then I bought a 25-foot length, and I'm still, because I now need to go to a full piece for the outside, I'm going to need probably another 20 feet. So 50 feet by 3 feet is probably the desired roll of screen you will need for this project. All right, we're at the final stages of skinning. So the way I skinned the exterior is I started with this round joint here. So basically 2 edges. I did an edge on this side, and then I did an edge on the opposite corner. Let that set, used a lot of drywall screws, kind of hand tightened in to hold it in place. Then I put the back on, and I actually wrapped the back underneath, holding it in place with drywall screws. When that sets, I'm gonna cut that back and then take out the drywall screws, which are there just to hold it until the bonding primer sets. And then the final screen, which I'm going to do in one full piece, because I do have the rounded corners. Hopefully this will work better. And I'm going to lay it all over. And this is, I guess, around a 9-foot length of screen. So pretty significant. Quickly, in terms of the progress as well, is we've done the first coat of spray within the different compartments. And you can see the inlaid wood that I'm going to use for the top hinges and for the side catches. All right, so skinning's complete now, and as you can see, the paint is complete too. We used a bed liner for the exterior and Rust-Oleum for the inside. The camp kitchen is upside down right now, and the reason for that is because I'm adhering the Yakima basket to the underside of it. As you can see, I'm just using U-bolts here, or U-joint, U-fittings, and I'll be screwing it in across all 3 sort of beams with the basket. Lesson learned where I sort of saved myself here. Originally I actually forgot to inlay the wood in the bottom parts, and I needed to, because I was going to be screwing into it. So what I decided to do was I added the wood to the plan. So this is the joist here, and I made sure that I marked exactly where the wood was. I'm glad I did, because with the truck bed liner on, it's pretty hard to tell where the wood is and where the foam is. So annotating everything in your plan as you build it is a good idea, especially for your inlaid wood, because you won't, if the paint goes well, you won't even be able to see where the wood has been inlaid. Because it's a pretty basic error. So when I installed the door, tried to install the door with the cage in, the door was too long. I deliberately overhung the door by about 1.5 inches. So the door is 24 inches and the unit is around 23. But it hit the bar. So I wasn't gonna be able to get it fully closed. So what I'm able to do is shim up the cage a little bit so that I can, because of this curvature in the cage here, I wasn't able to go right to the edge. So this way, I'm shimming it up so the bar will come in closer. So ultimately, if I'd built a 23-inch tall door, none of this would have been a problem. This is one of the downfalls to, I guess, skinning, is that I couldn't cut the door because I would have had to reskin all the edges. All right, we're getting near the end stages here, and a couple of modifications I had to make after the fact, so I'm letting you know so that you can make changes in your design if you want to. So I originally had 3.5-inch hinges. They were going to be too small. We got the weather stripping, so the screw holes weren't going to line up. So I ended up going with gate hinges. As you can see, they're a lot longer. But if you see the inlay of the wood, you can see that I actually didn't inlay enough wood to get all the screws in. So if I thought about this beforehand, I would have designed it for bigger hinges. Also, the door being 48 inches long, what you'll find when you build this is it's really flexible. So in hindsight, I think I would have gone with 3 hinges across the top. The reason for that is not really for support, but it's because the door is so flexible that it means that the weather stripping may not be as tight as I would have liked on the top. All right, quick walk around at the outside of the finished product. So the door is closed right now, as you can see. Went with the gate hinges on the top. Had to build it up a little bit. The door itself is 1/2 inch thick. So when I put in the catches for the sides, which work really well, I made sure to pre-drill the screws here because I didn't have a lot of wood to work with. The space for the 5-pound propane cylinder is there and it's exterior. Eventually I will have a small bungee which I will attach through the propane as well. We've got the 3 cross members on the bottom to provide structural support, and these are attached to the Yakima. The Yakima cage by these U-brackets here. And on the exterior side we went with truck bed liner because it can hold up against the elements very well. We originally tried to spray it on, it didn't work very well, so we ended up rolling it on and that worked great. And here's a visual of the inside once the camp kitchen is complete. So the drawers that I customized it for are Iris brand drawers, available on Amazon. Slightly different width and height for the 2 different areas that I looked at. I used some packing foam temporarily around the fridge for when I'm going to transport it, just to protect it. And the pony tank, or the 5-pound tank of propane, will be secured with a bungee. And all of this will be mounted into the Yakima XO system.